This movie starts with a room in disarray, portraying the aftermath of passionate sex. Dorian's voice recites wedding vows to his partner. The scene transitions to the bathroom, showing bloodstains by the side of the bathtub. Shantae's voice responds with her vows to Dorian, vows to love and respect Dorian all the days of her life. Shantae walks to the side of the pool, vexed. She's been calling Dorian on the phone with no response from him. Dorian apologizes and mentions how crazy work has been. Taking a break from his phone and taking a swim was the only way he could think to refresh. Shantae supposes they could begin plans for their anniversary, but Dorian has other ideas. Roman has his bachelor party that evening, and Dorian wishes to attend. Shantae is livid. The least Dorian could have done is inform her. Avoiding further argument, Shantae storms off while Dorian continues his swim, as if unbothered by Shantae's feelings. Later that night at the bachelor party, Roman and his friends have fun throwing money at strippers. A stripper walks up to Dorian, who's seated in a corner, lost in his thoughts. She whispers something into Dorian's ears, but Dorian barely acknowledges her. She walks off, Dorian busy fiddling with his ring. Remembering that Shantae might still be mad at him, he notifies her that he'll likely return home late. Reagan, Shantae's sister, struts up to Dorian. Dorian, who is unaware of Reagan's presence in town, is very surprised to see her. They chat, and Reagan shares her thoughts on marriage. She has no idea why men marry. Reagan's mannerisms are seductive while she's talking to Dorian, going as far as to expose her bare thighs. Just then, Dorian's friends, Miles, Roman, and Neil walk up to them. Reagan also flirts with the other men. She even offers to come with her girls to keep the men company, should they be interested. Reagan seems like the black sheep of her family. She's been in and out of jail for petty crimes. Neil and Miles are entranced by Reagan and her girls, but Roman notices the sadness in Dorian's eyes and asks what the issue is. Dorian opens up, confessing that he really loves Shantae. Dorian used to be a player, bragging about many sexual encounters. He's moved on from that life with hopes of a sharper focus. There's an altercation between Reagan and a lady that forces Reagan to pull out a knife. Dorian quickly steps in and takes Reagan away from the scene. He then offers to take Reagan home. On their way there, Reagan keeps making flirtatious moves at Dorian, but clarifies that she's only kidding. She alights and Dorian drives home. Dorian gets home and finds Shantae asleep. He stealthily lies on his side of the bed to avoid disturbing her. In the morning, Dorian finds Shantae in the kids' room, crying. Being without children weighs heavily on her. It's their anniversary, but instead of celebrating, it reminds her of what's missing. Shantae recalls how Dorian once prioritized his career, delaying their chances of having kids. Dorian reassures her that the children will come. She kisses him before leaving, hopeful despite their struggles. After all, the last miscarriage doesn't mean they won't have kids. At work, Shantae reflects on how far her marriage has come. Her thoughts are interrupted by a chat with an IT guy. Afterward, a colleague walks in and questions why Shantae isn't preparing for an anniversary celebration. The colleague speculates that Dorian might not love her anymore. Shantae recalls how she supported Dorian through college and even tolerated his cheating in the past. She feels disappointed that he hasn't stepped up to be the man she believes he should be. Her colleague suggests spicing up their marriage with new ideas, specifically recommending a marriage pass. Meanwhile, Dorian is at work when Roman walks in. Dorian confides that Shantae is desperate to have a child. Roman reminds him that Dorian has never wanted kids and advises him to tell Shantae the truth. However, Dorian fears it would devastate her. Shantae calls Dorian to tell him there's a surprise waiting for him at home. Roman jokingly suggests it's a trap to get Dorian to agree to have a baby. He advises Dorian to tread carefully. When Dorian gets home, he finds the house beautifully decorated with candles lit everywhere. Shantae, dressed to impress, is finishing up their anniversary dinner. She looks stunning, a sight Dorian can't resist. At the table, Shantae wants to know how Roman's bachelor's party went. Dorian then explains the Reagan incident to Shantae. It's time for the actual surprise. Shantae slides a paper to Dorian. It's a marriage pass. It gives Dorian a pass with another woman for an entire day. Dorian weighs the offer, unsure of what has gotten into his dear Shantae. He wonders if Shantae already has someone in mind to pass the time with. Shantae says she doesn't, but then she recalls the IT guy at the office with his nice smile. She explains that the marriage pass can help get their marital flair back. Dorian is with the boys at Roman's wedding dinner. He shares his wife's idea with them, and they become envious of him. Just then, Reagan walks in, causing a smirk to play on Dorian's face. She walks up to Miles, hugging him tight but somehow still has eyes for Dorian. Reagan steps out, in a manner that suggests she wants Dorian. Dorian follows her, and it leads to a brief makeout session. At home, still sitting in the car, Dorian clarifies the rules of the marriage pass. Shantae tells him he's free to do whatever he does for that day. No one has to know what the other does. Dorian contemplates a lot of things. He sees Shantae dressed up to utilize her marriage pass and immediately becomes jealous. But a deal is a deal. Shantae leaves and Dorian goes on a date with Reagan. He explains that the marriage pass situation is the reason he's doing this. But deep down, he also wanted to experience being with Reagan. Reagan confesses that she's having a thing with Miles, but Dorian doesn't mind. He'll still go ahead to sleep with Reagan, hoping they can keep it to themselves. Afterwards, Reagan can go back to Miles. Back at an apartment, Reagan and Dorian go on to have a splendid sexual encounter. Reagan makes Dorian confess his love for her in the heat of the moment. By morning, Reagan flirts with Dorian, but he isn't receptive. She begins mentioning scenarios suggesting how much sex Shantae might have had while utilizing her marriage pass. This messes with Dorian's mind, and he almost raises his hand at Reagan. Dorian returns home. Shantae is in the shower when a call from someone named Ray comes through on her phone. This raises suspicions in Dorian's mind. Shantae prepares to attend a family dinner without Dorian, but he insists on going, and they attend together. Outside Shantae's parents' house, Dorian expresses concern, wanting assurance that whatever happened during the marriage pass won't linger. Shantae reassures him, and they step inside. Shantae hugs her mom, while Dorian stands by awkwardly. Shantae's parents and Dorian don't get along. When Dorian offers to help set the table, Shantae's mom declines. Dorian steps outside to speak with Shantae's dad. However, Shantae's dad gives him a cold shoulder, stating that Shantae lost herself just to be with him. He also believes Dorian isn't worthy of his daughter and says this to his face before walking back inside, leaving Dorian questioning whether attending the dinner was a good idea. At the dining table, Reagan begins taking several pictures, claiming it's part of her job as a social media influencer. Their mom suggests she get a real job instead. Shantae offers to help Reagan find a job, but Reagan rejects the idea. The conversation escalates into an argument. Shantae insists Reagan needs to do better, while Reagan accuses Shantae of doing too much and insinuates that their parents care less about her. Reagan then storms out. Feeling unwell, Shantae asks for a moment alone and blocks Dorian's attempts to comfort her. She questions why her sister dislikes her so much. Dorian leaves and attempts to have a word with Reagan, but this almost escalates into another argument. Reagan continues her flirtatious ways with Dorian, who reiterates his stance. Reagan then takes several steps back and begins pleasuring herself. It's a good sight for Dorian, who can't help but lick his lips. Just then, Shantae walks in. Reagan quickly pulls herself together before Shantae notices any anomaly. The sisters apologize to each other and hug it out. The boys, except Miles, are playing basketball and ask Dorian about his marriage pass. Dorian lies, saying it was with a random woman they don't know. When asked, Dorian says he isn't interested in knowing how Shantae's pass went. Roman insists that Shantae would never cheat and likely didn't use hers. Miles then arrives at the court with Reagan. For a moment, Dorian seems consumed by jealousy. Miles casually hints that Dorian might have made a mistake by being with another woman. Being with Reagan, he adds, sets the expectation that Shantae should be as good in bed as her sister. This comment irritates Dorian, who opts to leave, but not before aggressively passing the ball to Miles. In his car, Dorian rests his head on the steering wheel in frustration. His mood shifts when Reagan enters the passenger seat. They begin kissing passionately. Miles notices Reagan in Dorian's car and is visibly confused. Dorian and Reagan drive to his office, where they have an intense lovemaking session. Later, they spend the evening at an arcade, playing games together. Dorian fulfills Reagan's request by taking pictures of her in sexy lingerie. They make love again, with Dorian completely ignoring Shantae's repeated phone calls. The next day, Reagan, uninvited, visits Dorian in his office. Without hesitation, they have yet another lovemaking session. At the car park, Reagan and Dorian can't get their hands off each other, and Miles eventually walks in on them, leading to a fistfight between both men, Dorian with the upper hand. It's game over for Miles when Reagan panics and stabs him with a pocket knife. He gives up the ghost on the spot. Dorian then asks Reagan to leave the scene. He puts Miles's lifeless body in his car and almost gets caught by a nurse. He makes the lonely and frantic drive to a river where disposes of Miles' body. Back home, Shantae's attempt to know what's troubling him is rebuffed. By morning, Dorian is eager to see if there's breaking news concerning last night's incident. Shantae enters the room. Her phone beeps and she looks at it, smiling. This triggers Dorian's jealousy. He accuses her of cheating. Shantae is hurt by his accusations, and Dorian's remorse doesn't help. She opts to spend a few days with her parents. There's a knock at the door. It's Reagan. She scolds Dorian for keeping her in the dark, but is happy to be back with him. As she seductively begins taking off her shirt, Shantae's car lock beeps outside. Panicking, Dorian quickly ushers Reagan into the closet just before Shantae enters. Shantae apologizes for being too hard on Dorian earlier, admitting she's missed his touch and wants to reconnect immediately. Dorian asks her to wait upstairs, and she complies. He then hurries Reagan out, promising her preference over his wife. The next day, Dorian visits the office complex to confirm if the parking lot CCTV is functional. Neil assures him it isn't. During their conversation, Neil mentions Miles hasn't been heard from in days and shares Miles's revelation that Reagan is pregnant. This agitates Dorian, who immediately confronts Reagan. Reagan embraces the idea of starting a family with Dorian, dismissing Shantae's feelings entirely. Unknowing to Dorian, Reagan has mailed ultrasound results and a note to his apartment, revealing her pregnancy. Shantae finds the mail, likely just as Reagan planned. Dorian, still adamant about not having children, feels his life spiraling out of control. He transfers $10,000 to Reagan as a bribe, urging her to leave his life and terminate the pregnancy. Returning home, Dorian can't find Shantae, and he becomes deeply worried by her absence and lack of communication. Desperate to cover his tracks, he uses Miles's phone to send a group message to himself and his friends, claiming Reagan is terminating the pregnancy. Shantae enters the house while Dorian is sleeping. She shatters things in the kid's room, unable to properly process the thought that Dorian will be having a kid with someone else. Dorian explains that the pregnancy has been taken care of. She calmly starts to reveal that she can't have children due to early menopause. She knows about Dorian's foul play. Dorian never wanted a baby, or even marriage. She recalls how Dorian was lackadaisical when she had a miscarriage. He'd taken his precious time intending to get her to the hospital when it was already too late. Dorian promises that he's ready to do better, but at this point it's over. Shantae has other plans. At work, a member of the medical board shows Dorian a video of himself having sex with Reagan. Reagan sent the video to every member of the board. She also included documents that claim she was Dorian's patient. Dorian gets suspended for sleeping with a patient. His efforts to reach Reagan are futile. After a near altercation with the IT guy, mistaking him for Ray, the police visit him. Reagan reported Dorian to them, claiming assault among other things. The interrogation becomes tough and Dorian asks the policeman to leave. Dorian picks up Miles's phone and finds that it was Reagan's plan all along for Miles to show up at Dorian's office the day he passed on. Reagan sets up a meeting with Dorian and he shows up. Reagan wants every penny that Dorian is worth. Much later, Dorian hands over all his cash to her, $1,500,000. Dorian goes home and finds a letter and Shantae's wedding ring waiting for him. The letter reveals that Shantae knows it was Dorian who poisoned her drink, which led to her miscarriage. Everything that has happened between Dorian and Reagan was carefully planned by Shantae to ruin Dorian's life, a payback for all the betrayals and wickedness he's shown her. All evidence points to Dorian being guilty of all the crimes Reagan has alleged. The police arrest him. The movie ends with Shantae and Reagan finding their own way forward. Shantae goes on to open a restaurant with part of the money collected from Dorian. Reagan goes on vacation with her baby bump.